In this video, I'll be breaking down and ranking every hidden weapon in Call of Duty Zombies. These weapons are all loaded into the game but were made inaccessible, and instead of ranking them by performance, I'll just be ranking them by how interesting or cool they are. We'll be combing through every single one I could find, and we're starting right down at number 23, where we have the Origin shield found in Black Ops 4. Yes, this dose of nostalgia can be loaded both in Ether maps and Chaos maps, and boy, is it terrible. I mean, for one, it doesn't actually work as a shield. Like, literally, you can hold it in front of zombies and they'll still hit you. Secondly, its melee attack is... I mean, it basically does no damage. I mean, here on round 1, I literally can't kill a zombie. They just don't die. And thirdly, if you stow the shield, it doesn't go on your back, it just gets removed entirely. Now, of course, this weapon is cut from the game, so I don't expect it to function normally, but this is a whole nother level of ass. It does make me curious on why it's even here though. Was Black Ops 4 gonna get an Origin themed map, or is this just a leftover item for testing purposes? Either way, I'd say it's fair to put it at the bottom of the list. Coming in at number 22, we have the Willy Pete grenade found in Black Ops 2's Mob of the Dead. Another completely useless item here. Effectively, this weapon acts as a smokescreen, and you might recognize this effect because it is what the Brutus uses during combat. But unfortunately, in the hands of players, it does literally nothing. Like, it doesn't damage zombies, it doesn't damage the player, it just creates a smokescreen. That's all it does. And no, it doesn't baffle the zombies either. It is literally smoke. That's it. That's its whole thing. So naturally, it deserves to be this far down in the list. But moving on to number 21 in the list, we have the freezing ballistic knife found only in Alpha Omega in Black Ops 4. Now, on paper, this weapon kind of sounds fire. A ballistic knife with a freezing ability? That sounds pretty sick. But the problem is that this weapon clearly wasn't finished because there's nothing about it that freezes zombies. It's just a ballistic knife. Now, there is a very faint kind of ice cold smoky effect when you actually melee a zombie with this thing, but it's just a faint cloud of smoke. There's no actual effect on the zombie. It doesn't seem to slow them down, and it definitely doesn't freeze them in any way. At least that's the case in my testing. And no, you can't take it to the Pack-a-Punch machine either. Would have been a cool concept to see though, and I'm very curious as to why Treyarch decided Alpha Omega would be the platform to try this on. Maybe it's a weapon that was actually poised to come out with Tag the Toten. That would have of course made a lot more sense, but unfortunately, this was just a weapon that was never finished and never saw the light of day. But coming up to number 20, we have the broken Apothecon Servant from Shadows of Evil in Black Ops 3. Now, the code names for the Apothecon Servants in Shadows of Evil is just dubbed the ID gun, and then it will have a number that is associated with the player that uses it. However, there is another ID gun which is basically unlisted. It's not assigned to any player, and when you spawn it into your hands, it looks the same, it reloads the same, except it doesn't actually spawn any black hole. Instead, it fires off a kind of generic AoE attack, which, by the way, hardly does any real damage. I mean, hey, it's pretty good at making crawlers, but genuinely, that's about it. Maybe this was actually like a first draft of the Apothecon Servant that Treyarch made. I mean, if that is the case, I'm sure as hell glad they improved it, because this would have been tragic. But I mean, hey, we're still very, very low down on this list, so things only get more interesting from here. But before they do, let's go to Origins to experience a very similar thing with the Ice Staff. So here in Black Ops 2 Origins, in the code of the game, you can load the cheap Ice Staff. I mean, it's literally called the cheap Ice Staff, and what it is, just like that broken Apothecon Servant, is basically a terrible version of the Ice Staff. It does very minimal damage, creates crawlers, and doesn't freeze them whatsoever. So I think it's pretty aptly named in the game's code, but I am genuinely curious as to why a staff called the cheap Ice Staff is even in the game. Like, what was its original purpose? Either way, I'm glad they changed it, because you can see here in this comparison, when we use the proper Ice Staff on the same round, it is far, far more effective. Bottom line, this cheap Ice Staff is bloody awful, so we're moving on. Coming in at number 18, we have a sea of unused equipment found in Black Ops 4. Now, I've decided to bundle all of these weapons into one entry because I don't want this list to drag too long before we get to the really good stuff. But in Black Ops 4, there's multiple different pieces of equipment that basically were in the game but weren't accessible to players. And there's actually quite a lot. A lot of them pretty much don't work at all, but the ones that are actually usable kicks off with the Acid Semtex grenade. Now, what's interesting about this is that whilst the model appears to be a Semtex when you're actually doing doing the animation, when you throw it into the actual map, it shows up as a Widow's Wine grenade. But it behaves just like Semtex. It sticks to the enemies and blows up, you know, the usual stuff. But then the explosion is basically the same explosion found from the acid grenade, which is of course an actual usable piece of equipment in the game. It's not particularly weak or strong, it just behaves like you'd expect it to. But on top of that, there were also incendiary grenades, which were very broken. First off, instead of setting zombies on fire, it just kind of acts like a generic explosion, even though visually you see a pool of fire. But the other thing is that this pool of fire never disappears for the rest of the game. The effect just stays there. It just keeps burning and never stops. But when you walk zombies over the fire, it does nothing. So basically it has the visual effects of a Molotov, but then behaves like a very weak, very generic frag grenade. But speaking of Molotovs, they were actually loaded into Black Ops 4 as well. And these actually behave properly. They start a pool of fire that does actually set zombies on fire as well, both on initial impact and also when they walk over it. In fact, it's actually pretty decent. It's not as good as Wraith Fires, but definitely exhibits a very similar behavior. And I'm guessing Wraith Fires were just a more creative direct replacement for these Molotovs, because these Molotovs are pretty much fully functional. I mean, they regenerate on the UI, they act and behave just like a Molotov would. It's got full animations, the sound plays, it's, yeah, pretty much complete. But I think they made the right call. I think Wraith Fires are far cooler, and it definitely gives zombies more of a unique feel when weapons are kind of reskinned and rebranded. But the last piece of equipment that I want to touch on here in Black Ops 4 are proximity mines. Pretty simple. Throw the mine on the floor, and when a zombie comes close enough, it detonates. Except it is weak as shit in Black Ops 4 Zombies. Like, it is terrible. And to make matters worse, it concusses the player and then leaves a very annoying effect that never goes away. So that's good. Ultimately, I think Treyarch made the right call to leave this stuff inaccessible and kind of come up with some more unique equipment for the full release of the game. Moving on now, though, to number 17, we have the broken Mustang and Sally from Black Ops 1. Matter of fact, this is just a case of broken dual-wield weapons across the entire scope of Black Ops. I mean, whilst this thing is a complete mess, there are a few interesting things about it, like how the hammer is raised on the model, but then when you start sprinting with it, it all kind of reverts back to the proper Mustang and Sally's. It's really confusing. Of course, when you're not sprinting though, the animations are completely broken. From the firing, to the diving, to the reloads, it's all completely broken. I mean, for starters, where's the left one? Like, it's just not there. And what's even weirder is that when you fire this thing, not only can you not see the projectiles, but it is incredibly delayed. Unlike the proper Mustang and Sally's, where you shoot, you see the grenade fire off and blow up when it hits its contact. With these Dirty Harry pistols, it just takes forever for the explosion to actually trigger. Like, it's on a mad delay. And to make matters worse, I'm pretty sure this version is weaker as well, but still does an insane amount of splash damage. What's also crazy though is that the 1911 isn't the only weapon you can do this on. You can actually load a broken version of any of the dual wield weapons, and that's not just restricted to Black Ops 1. Now, the reason they're broken is actually because dual wield weapons are defaulted to be spawned with the right weapon, where the left weapon is kind of like an attachment to it. To access these broken variants, all you do is basically spawn in the left side part of the dual wield weapon, and so you're left with what is basically an attachment without a base, and that's why it's so glitchy. Moving on to number 16 now though, we shift our focus here in Black Ops 1 to a series of hidden upgrades, and more specifically ones for the DG2. Now, you guys might be aware that you can actually load upgraded versions of weapons in the classic World at War maps that didn't even have a pack-a-punch. This of course translated to being able to use weapons like the Commando, the Ray Gun, and also the Wunderwaffe DG2, all in their upgraded variants. Now, on Shinonuma, the upgraded Wunderwaffe basically is fully functional. I mean, it's got all of the sounds except the firing sound. It's missing the firing sound, but it's got the animations, it's got that gorgeous gold camo, which on this map in particular looks so sick. But this upgraded variant was also found in the code for Call of the Dead and can be loaded into the game again with console commands, just like the rest of the weapons in this list. What's different about the Call of the Dead variant though is that it does have all of the sounds, but it does lose the gold camo. The gold camo isn't loaded into Call of the Dead, and so it's just this massive blacked out texture, which of course makes this version look really unfinished, but everything else is literally fully functional. I still think it's pretty cool though that, especially in the case of these older World at War maps, you can load upgraded weapons in the actual maps themselves. So it does lead you to think, were they going to add a Pack-a-Punch machine similarly to how they added, you know, the mule kick machines to these COD 5 maps? Who knows? I personally think that would have been pretty cool, but you know, we got what we got. Number 15, the hidden Winter's Howls in Black Ops 4. Now, as we know, in Black Ops 4, we got a complete remake of the Winter's Howl in Classified. But what's interesting is that this weapon can also be loaded into Alpha Omega and Tag der Toten. And I mean, Tag der Toten especially feels like a very natural place for this weapon. And I think Treyarch knew that too, because when loading the Winter's Howl into Tag der Toten, literally everything about it is completely finished. All of the sounds, all of the animations, all of the effects, it is literally one-to-one with the Winter's Howl found in Classified. By contrast, in Alpha Omega, it does also function very, very well, but it is missing the sound when firing. In both cases though, you can load the upgraded variant, the Winter's Fury, again using console commands, but you can't take the standard version to the Pack-a-Punch and upgrade it like normal. I have always thought that it's a bit of a shame that the Winter's Howl didn't get enough love. I mean, yeah, it is pretty weak, but I love the concept of it, and with a few buffs and tweaks, especially with this Black Ops 4 remake, it would have been really nice to see it in all 3 maps instead of just in Classified. Performance-wise, from what I could gather, these variants behave exactly like the versions in Classified, and so it really does beg the question, why was this weapon made inaccessible? Some things really aren't for us to know. Moving on to number 14 though, we have a series of campaign weapons that you can load in 5. Now this is a cool one because I found this when I was dumping all of the weapons loaded into the game, and I haven't really seen anyone else talk about this. Now starting off with the not so crazy stuff, we have the Willy Pete grenade, except unlike in Black Ops 2's Mob of the Dead, this actually works. Not only does it create a cloud of smoke, but it also deals damage to zombies and also deals splash damage to the player. In fact, the way it fogs up the environment is actually pretty sick. On top of that though, we also have functioning flash grenades. I mean, functioning in the sense that you can flash yourself, doesn't actually stun the zombies in any way, but still kind of cool to see it here nonetheless. And before we get into the real interesting stuff, I was also able to load in the campaign frag grenades, though I couldn't really distinguish a difference between those and the ones we already have in zombies. But now onto the interesting stuff. First off, we can load in the campaign M1911, which comes with a black finish and also 7 rounds to a clip instead of the 8 that the zombies version has. But it makes up for it in that it is way stronger than the chromed out zombies version. I'm not talking so strong that you can take it to high rounds or anything, but it is far stronger in the context of the earlier rounds. I also think it's just really interesting to see the blacked out finish in zombies. It does look a lot like the 1911 that we see in Black Ops 2, but that's not even everything. We can also load in the campaign M16, and the difference is that it has far more ammo in reserve and it's fully automatic. Damage wise, this M16 doesn't pull any crazy numbers, and unfortunately none of these weapons can be upgraded at the Pack-a-Punch, nor can any kind of upgrade be spawned in through console commands. But nonetheless, especially when you combine all this gear together, it feels really cool to use. And I find it fascinating that this is only available in 5, which of course was a map that was featured in the campaign, but I still feel like these weapons were purposefully loaded into this zombies map, and I can't help but wonder why. Moving on to number 13, we have the Walther P38 pistol found in Call of Duty World at War. This pistol, it slaps. It's got aura, a common German pistol in World War II. In terms of damage in the context of zombies, this is far more powerful than the 1911. And yes, it is loadable in every single map in World at War as well, and does kind of spark a theory that I remember hearing when this pistol was first discovered in the game, which was a question of whether Treyarch was intending to allow the zombies crew in this game to have their own dedicated starting pistols, because of course, Nikolai being Russian would have had the Tokarev, Takeo being Japanese would have had the Nambu, Dempsey with the 1911, leaving Richtofen with this P38. If that was their intention, it of course didn't come to fruition, and this Walther is the only non-American pistol that you can access. And sadly, no, you cannot take it to the Pack-a-Punch. There seems to be no upgraded variant for this weapon at all, but it's still fun to use, and it's, you know, got a decent enough amount of damage that even in like the mid rounds, it still kind of holds up. Of course, no sane person would choose to use it over, say, you know, a PPSH or a Thompson, but still, it's a pretty cool weapon that has all of the sounds, all of the animations. It's fully functional, and I think it deserves to be kind of in the middle of this list. But moving on to number 12, we have the AK-47 found in Black Ops 1. Now, the unfortunate thing about this assault rifle is that it doesn't have any sounds, which is a bit of a letdown because I love the Black Ops 1 AK-47. In multiplayer and in the campaign, this weapon felt incredible to use, and it genuinely breaks my heart that it was made inaccessible in zombies, especially considering the fact that it is in the game. You just can't access it. It doesn't have any kind of upgrade variant, and again, doesn't have the sounds. Its damage is also terrible. It clearly hasn't been rebalanced for zombies in any way, but its animations still work, and it somehow still feels really nice to use. Like, I can't quite explain it. Something about the Black Ops 1 AK just feels so incredible. It's clear that it was originally meant to be in zombies, but was just kind of scrapped. I mean, of course, that much is obvious by the fact you can load it into zombies, but it's made even more obvious by the fact that you cannot load it in any of the DLC maps. You can only spawn this AK in the maps that were available at launch. So that would be Kino, 5, and all of the World at War maps. Because for those who have forgotten, the World at War maps were available at launch through the hardened edition of the game, so they weren't just from the Resurrection DLC. Not having even like an unfinished Pack-a-Punch variant though, it really does break my heart. This whole thing does. And the reason why I've ranked this, higher than say the Walther P38 that we just went over is because it could have been so special. It really, can you tell I'm passionate about this? It could have been amazing, especially if it had like the flamethrower attachment when Pack-a-Punch, from multiplayer. I think I actually remember seeing Frigid, a Black Ops 3 custom map, actually do this. It would have been so cool to have in the original, but we can't have everything. On to number 11, we have the Black Ops 3 Shadows of Evil Wunderwaffe DG2. Yes, whether it was originally meant to be in place of the Apothicon Servant or coexist alongside it, the Wunderwaffe is loaded into Shadows of Evil. And it's also fully functional. It has all of the animations, all of the sounds. The only thing that doesn't work, strangely, is the bulbs on the side of it. They're just completely blacked out, and so they don't reflect your ammo. Performance-wise, it behaves just like the Wunderwaffe from the Giant, except curiously, it does absolutely no damage to Margwas. Margwas are completely immune to this weapon, and so it really gets me thinking, why is this weapon actually here? And my only theory is that, when they were developing the launch for Black Ops 3, it was the original intent to have the Wunderwaffe be the wonder weapon for Shadows of Evil. But then upon deciding to make the Giant, of course, it would have made a lot more sense to be in that map and come up with something fresh and new for Shadows of Evil. Hence why the Wunderwaffe in the Giant is fully complete. Whilst you can't take this Wunderwaffe to the Pack-a-Punch directly, you can spawn the DG3JZ, again using console commands. Again though, even this upgraded variant does nothing to Margwas. I still think it's a very cool entry into this list though, and I feel like it gives us kind of like a behind the scenes look at Treyarch's thought processes for the launch of Black Ops 3. Next up, coming in at number 10, we have the hidden Green Run gear. Now, like with Black Ops 4 equipment, I've decided to just kind of bring this all into one entry into the list, where effectively you can load the full roster of the transit equipment into any of the survival maps within Green Run. Your town, bus depot, and farm. What this translates to is being able to access claymores, Semtex grenades, and also the full range of upgraded variants of weapons, even on maps like farm and bus depot that don't actually have the Pack-a-Punch accessible. More importantly though, this also grants players access to this shield, which in the context of some of these Green Run survival maps genuinely changes the game, because this shield is fully functional. It's both a lethal melee weapon and very effective at protecting you, just like the normal shield found in transit. It is exactly the same. But as you guys might have guessed, it doesn't just mean you can load the shield. It also means you can load the jet gun into these survival maps. Having all of this at your disposal drastically changes the feel of these maps as well, especially when you're combining it all together. Being able to use claymores with upgraded variants of weapons that aren't even in the box in some of these survival maps, like, the AK-74U, for example, or the M16, and you also get to choose between a shield or a jet gun, and suddenly these maps feel very different to play in. Whilst it's a very cool little extra though, I am kind of glad Treyarch kept these maps the way that they are. I think it's kind of neat to have a map like Farm that doesn't have a Pack-a-Punch to kind of give players more of a World at War feel to gameplay, but also present players with the choice to play a map like Town where things are a little bit easier. All in all though, it's still pretty cool that you can load these weapons into them. Coming in at number 9 now, we have the Black Ops 4 Death Machine. And no, we're not talking about the overkill minigun specialist ability here. We're talking about a dedicated death machine found in Black Ops 4, which is basically following the same model and performance of the Scythe, which is Reaper's ability from multiplayer. This boasts an insane fire rate, infinite ammo, just as we know and love from the classic death machines from the previous games, except it just never made the final version of the game. At least it's not accessible. A standout reason why is just probably the overkill ability. It's obviously way too similar, and it kind of would have been weird to have both. But it's still cool that you can actually access this weapon, and yeah, it's insanely powerful. And I don't know, it just kind of would have have been cool to see nonetheless. You can tell it's a Death Machine power-up though, because when you put this weapon away, even when you give it to yourself through console commands, the weapon becomes gone forever until, again, you respawn it with console commands. So this weapon doesn't stay in your inventory, which obviously leads us all to believe that this definitely was originally intended to be the power-up that we know from previous titles. Whilst I understand that the overkill ability kind of does make this thing redundant, and it makes sense that it's not accessible in the final build of the game, I still think the way Black Ops 4 did abilities when compared to the way Black Ops 3 did them is just kind of silly. Black Ops 4 really should have ran with the nailed formula that Black Ops 3 exhibited, but that's a whole other topic for a whole other video. But moving on to number 8, we head back onto Black Ops 3, where we take a look at the HK416, commonly known as the M27. This fine-ass weapon that I truly love, previously only seen in Nuketown Zombies, was actually loaded into both Der Eisendrache and Zetsubo no Shima. You want to know the sad part about this? Damage-wise, it feels just like an ICR, so it's balanced pretty well. It's got all of the sounds, it's got all of the animations, and it looks decent. So why on earth was this not made accessible in the final release? I mean, it is truly baffling to me. I mean, what's even crazier is that they actually added new Black Ops 3 animations, in that if you slide with this weapon, the left arm detaches from the barrel, just like the other assault rifles in Black Ops 3, which means they actually adapted the animations for this gun, ready to be used in this game, and then just never actually made it accessible. Like, it's genuinely mind-boggling. It is completely finished, and whilst you can't take it to the Pack-a-Punch to upgrade it, you can spawn an upgraded variant again in the console commands. And as a massive fan of the M27 from Nuketown Zombies, this is just a massive blow. Just like with the AK-47 from back in Black Ops 1, it just would have been so cool to see this in the final version, available to all players from the mystery box, or even as a wall buy, just in some capacity. It looks great, it feels great, it performs great. It's just a brilliant weapon, and it deserves to see the light of day, that's for sure. Moving on to number 7 though, we head way back to World at War, where we see the Dirty Harry 1911. Now this weapon fully functions, albeit with some weird animations, but it's very cool to see, especially in the earlier maps where there was no Pack-a-Punch, because of course this is an explosive pistol, so it behaves a lot like the Pack-a-Punch 1911 from Der Reese, except you can use it in maps that don't have a Pack-a-Punch at all. This of course gives this weapon an edge over other weapons that were available in these earlier maps. The major downside though is that the splash damage is insane. You can completely wipe yourself out from a single shot with this thing if you don't have Jug, but unfortunately in terms of damage it really isn't that strong at all, and completely pales in comparison to the official 1911 from Der Reese. It's still very cool to see though, and very fun to use. And fun facts, the reason why it's actually loaded into Zombies is because some of you might remember you used to be able to glitch the game into running death cards in the Zombies mode. And as death cards work in Zombies, one of them was dubbed Suicide King, where if you go down, you fire off an explosive 1911, which is actually the same 1911 we're talking about here. So because Zombies is capable of loading the death cards, naturally the maps have loaded this 1911 that came with one of the death cards. Overall, the reason why it's ranked so highly in this list is because it truly changes the tide in the maps that predate Der Reese. Because there's no Pack-a-Punch available on those maps, it really does just change the entire feel when you're wielding this thing. Not to mention it fully functions, it has working animations, working sounds, and is genuinely a very complete weapon. Moving on to number 6 though, we have a really cool weapon that I haven't seen anyone else talk about. This is the Elephant's Eye found in 9 of Black Ops 4. And yes, this weapon does act as a reference to the final boss fight in this map. Now in game, this shows on the HUD as the Circuit's Kiss, which of course we know to be the upgraded Death of Orion. But what's interesting is that whilst it has the appearance of the Circuit's Kiss, a keen eye will notice that it actually has a pistol grip and a weird attachment underneath that isn't actually on the real weapon. And as you can see on screen, it definitely doesn't behave like the Death of Orion either. Effectively, it shoots this arc of energy that deals a small amount of explosive damage to the enemies that it hits. It has a very aggressive arc as well, and it kind of springs up and lands back down again. It's a very interesting weapon. It's fully automatic. It doesn't do much damage, but I'll tell you one thing, it's cool as fuck. Whilst the effects from this weapon are actually derived from one of the attacks that the Elephant does in the boss fight, it reminds me heavily of the cutscenes that we saw for the Chaos maps, in which you can kind of see this energy kind of possess and convert the humans into zombies. And it's so cool to be able to shoot this as a projectile in the actual game. it is incredibly cool, and I think it definitely deserves to be higher up in this list, just because, I mean, I don't see anyone else talking about this, and I think it's a very curious weapon, and I don't know if it was ever meant to be in the hands of players, but I mean, it's fully usable. It has animations, it has an ammo count, it completely functions, and I think it's just one of those things that kind of brings up a lot of questions, and those are kind of my favorite things to see in zombies. But moving on to the top 5 now, we come to a weapon that truly has legendary status, and that is the upgraded Sliquifier found in Die Rise of Black Ops 2. Now, this isn't to be confused with the glitch that you can do, or kind of like mini Easter egg, to revert the Sliquifier back to its pre-patch state. This is actually an upgraded variant of the Sliquifier that's loaded into the map but completely inaccessible. Now, the only known difference between this upgraded version and the standard version is that the goo lasts around twice as long, but it is still cool to see that there was an upgraded variant planned, and kind of begs the question if there was meant to be a quest to do it in the earlier stages of this map's development. I'm pretty sure I remember this kind of being like an urban legend back in the days when this map was actually pretty new. People were talking about ways you can upgrade the Sliquifier, but none of the videos were real. But it's quite funny to know that there actually was a Sliquifier loaded into the game. It's just impossible to retrieve. The upgraded variant, though, does still have all of the animations, all of the sounds. It performs as expected, and again, rests as another kind of big question mark as to why Treyarch didn't allow this to be accessible in the final build of the game. But of course, the Sliquifier isn't the only one that had this question raised. Of course, there was one other standout weapon that even had a glitch to get the upgraded variant, which was subsequently taken from us, and that, of course, steps us right into number 4 with the hidden upgraded version of the Apothicon Servant in Shadows of Evil. Now, whilst we could upgrade the Apothicon Servant in Revelations, the OGs of Black Ops 3 might remember that you could originally upgrade the Apothicon Servant in Shadows of Evil using a glitch. The glitch was pretty dead simple. All you had to do was switch to the Apothicon Servant just as you walked towards the prompts to Pack-a-Punch, and the Apothicon Servant would get thrown in, and what would come out was a clear, distinct, upgraded variant. It had a new name. The purple black holes would now turn red. It had far more ammo, and the black holes would last longer as well. What's interesting, though, is that once they patched this glitch, they also seem to have nerfed the upgraded variant of the Apothicon Servant, but still kept it loaded into the map. What I mean is, when I use console commands to spawn in the upgraded Apothicon Servant, it's simply not as good as the version that you could do using the glitch back when this game launched. I mean, for starters, the vortexes are purple again instead of the red one that we saw on the upgraded pre-patch variant. The ammo count isn't as good as the glitched version, and the vortexes don't last as long as the glitched version either. So rather than remove the weapon entirely, they just nerfed it and made it inaccessible, which is, yeah, kind of weird. Ultimately, though, this weapon basically just fell naturally into legendary status. Once they patched it, everyone was trying to figure out a way to unlock it, whether there was a quest to do it, but eventually we got an answer from Jason Blundell himself, who confirmed that there was no way to upgrade the Apothicon Servant in Shadows of Evil. Of course, you could do it in Revelations, but then we're left with another very weird decision from Treyarch, where there was clearly a sophisticated, finished version of the upgraded Apothicon Servant available in Shadows of Evil that they actively took away from the community and then proceeded to make it worse even after it was no longer accessible. I'll never understand it, to be honest. But moving on now, we come to the top 3, and here we go to Black Ops 4 for the hidden Wunderwaffe DG2 found in Tag der Toten. Now, of course, we know about the Wunderwaffe Sniper or Wunderwaffe DG1 found in Tag der Toten. That's the weapon that they made publicly available. However, what many people don't know is that the DG2 is actually loaded into this map and fully functions. It is missing all of the sounds, but it does act just like the traditional Wunderwaffe that we know and love. And in fact, this version is actually stronger than the previous Wunderwaffes that we've seen in the history of COD Zombies. And I actually take a deeper dive into the specifics of this in a video that I made a little while ago called The History of the Wunderwaffe DG2 in COD Zombies. And I'll post a link for that on the top right corner of the screen now. Definitely one of my most underrated videos, by the way. Now, whilst all of the animations work for this weapon, one interesting part is that the bulbs on the side of the weapon seem to be misaligned by 90 degrees. But besides that and missing sounds, this thing functions beautifully. It's actually very, very fun to use. Honestly, in my opinion, it begs the question as to why we didn't have the DG1 and the DG2 at the same time when this map did play host to both the Thunder Gun and the Tundra Gun. But anyway, whilst you can't actually take this Wunderwaffe variant to the Pack-a-Punch, you can spawn the DG3JZ upgraded version through the command console and enjoy what is genuinely the most powerful version of the Wunderwaffe to date, as for some reason it can break past the 10 zombie limitation with the chain reaction. It's actually a shame that this version of the DG2 wasn't finished and made accessible in this map, especially considering that it was the last map in the Ether storyline, and the Wunderwaffe was originally introduced to us at the same time as we got the original crew. It just felt like a missed opportunity to wrap a nice little bow around the classic Ether storyline. But now we move on to number 2, and that is the brains. The brains from Black Ops 1 and World at War, but mostly the World at War version. Now what this effectively were zombie arms that you could actually equip and use in first person, which is pretty cool. Now in World at War especially, the animations and everything were really fun to use, and when you actually meleeed, you would swing your arms and actually make a zombie noise as you did so. What's curious as well is that even on maps outside of Nacht und Toten, the noises that you actually make when using these arms did actually feature some of those iconic noises found only in Nacht und Toten of World at War. Now damage wise, it is terrible, I won't lie. It's worse than the standard knife, wherein you have to do multiple hits on zombies even on round 1. So I imagine you guys can kind of fill a picture as to what it's like to use these things on later rounds. It's basically don't bother trying. But I do think it's still an incredibly cool weapon to use, especially when you understand that its purpose was actually to be used in trailers. For those who don't remember, there's a very brief shot in the original trailer for Verrückt that had these zombie arms in it, and I'm pretty sure that was their sole purpose. So it's pretty cool to use this weapon that was clearly originally intended for cinematic purposes, even if it performs terribly. And I think the added touch of making zombie noises whilst you swing is, yeah, it just completes it for me. Now it gets really curious when we move on to Black Ops 1, because the zombie arms aren't in Kino, they're not in 5, they're not in any of the DLC maps except for the World at War ones, which means they effectively ported this weapon from World at War for no real reason. And interestingly as well, it's not as good in Black Ops 1. I mean, one cool thing is that it is based on the view arms of the character. So for example, if you're playing as Richtofen, the zombie arms kind of have his gloves and everything, which is cool, except when you melee with it now in Black Ops 1, it just uses the knife animation, which is, yeah, kind of just ruins it. And it also doesn't play any zombie sounds anymore. Because it plays the knife animation though, the damage is, well, the same as the knife, because that's the actual weapon that you're using. But overall, it's fair to say that the World at War version is just far better, far cooler, and I'm glad that it's actually usable in the game. For me, I can kind of just imagine it as a leftover from a Treyarch employee that was just kind of having fun. And to me, that just makes it infinitely better. Now, before we get into number 1, it's worth mentioning that there's a few extra little things that I could have touched on, but I didn't want this video to literally last forever. But there's a few other cool things you can do. For example, you can load the MP40 in Black Ops 1 on maps that don't actually have it. You can load in this weirdly broken Matryoshka doll that pops out an inanimate monkey bomb, and you can load in whatever the f you call this. So without diving into literally every single weird thing that loads into the game, let's move on to number 1. And here we have what is probably the most iconic hidden weapon of any COD ever, and that is of course the default weapon, aka the finger blaster, because yeah, that's what it's known as. This weapon features in World at War, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, and Black Ops 4. Now the Black Ops 1 and 2 versions are the best, but let's just go through each version anyway. In World at War, it has this very weird owned cowbell looking model on the side of the left arm, which is weird, but again, kind of just makes you realize that Treyarch devs were just having fun at the time. But the default weapon is basically just fingers. Shooting with your fingers, why not? Now in World at War, the ammo count is hidden, but it does still exist and you can run out of ammo with this gun. It's semi-automatic and it cannot be upgraded because yeah, if you could take your own fingers to the Pack-a-Punch machine, that would have been pretty fucking weird, though I guess I'm acting like this isn't already weird. But anyway, once you're done finger blasting on World at War, we can move on to Black Ops 1, in which we have the best version, in my opinion, of the default weapon. First off, the ammo count is now visible, and you can actually see now that it reloads in groups of 5. So there's 10 to a clip, and each reload is 5 rounds at a time. What's also cool is that now in Black Ops 1, because different zombie characters have different view arms, it basically means that the default weapon is actually different in appearance depending on who you're playing as. What's also cool is that it's now fully automatic, which now makes it more apparent that perks actually work with it. So if you grab double tap, for example, you can actually see the fire rate increase and then you're blasting even faster. I think with the different hand models as well, it's just a really cool variation, and the fact that this can be loaded in any of the zombies maps is just a really nice cherry on top. The same story goes for Black Ops 2, where the default weapon is pretty much exactly the same as the Black Ops 1 version, except for some reason, in my opinion, it kind of looks a little more cursed on the left hand, though I'm pretty sure it is exactly the same. Particularly on Origins though, this weapon really does look look very cool. They're just the most satisfying fingers to, yeah, I'm just going to stop my sentence. But yeah, you get my point. It looks cool, okay? Just whatever. But then when it comes to Black Ops 3, it actually changes, and not in a good way. First off, the model looks kind of deformed. The fingers look weird, man. They don't look right. It looks kind of cursed. Also, the recoil animation just looks a little bit off. Just, yeah, the whole thing kind of looks busted. It's at this point where it just kind of gets ridiculous, as if it wasn't already, right? But then you come to Black Ops 4, which is the same as Black Ops 3. Like, it's pretty much 1-to-1, but somehow looks even more cursed. Like, I really don't know how else to explain it. I mean, on some characters, it looks weird. On other characters, like, it just looks straight up broken. But I mean, look at Diego's fingers, bro. Look, what the heck is this shit, bro? This is crazy. What is that thumb doing? Yeah, it's disturbing. It's very, very disturbing. I don't even know what to make of this anymore. But so long as we focus on the default weapon from World at War through Black Ops 2, it really was just like a kind of iconic piece that anyone that got into any kind of hacked modded lobbies knew about, and it just became legend ever since. To my understanding, the default weapon is just kind of like a template that the COD devs used just to make sure like weapon functions were acting correctly. But the fact that it's loadable in any zombies map is just super fun. And yeah, I can imagine a lot of Treyarch employees were having a lot of fun with this back in the day. But yes, the default weapon has terrible damage, so we're not even going to talk about performance. It's simply how legendary the weapon is that earns it its place in the #1 spot. But that concludes this colossal ass video on all of the hidden weapons in COD Zombies. Now I want to see a like if you saw a weapon that you didn't know was in the game. And if you're new around here, make sure you subscribe for more content like this in the future. But much love, stay blessed, and I hope to catch you soon. Cheers.